my unit was one of the first units in Way City. Way City was the biggest battle of the Tet Offensive,
Yeah.
and because Fubai, our base camp, was less than 10 miles away, and it was Alpha Company that was of First Marines that went in first, and they really got shot up. And then, of course, took a couple of days. The day I left for R&R is when my unit left for Way City, and
Wow.
I got to Hawaii. When I got to Hawaii, we checked into our hotel. I turned on the TV, and the first thing we saw was the fighting in Way City. So we just turned off the TV, didn't watch it, didn't watch TV for the next 5 days.
What was your reaction? I wonder if it was a mix. Was it partly, I really should be with my fellow Marines right now? Or was it, thank God I'm not in Way right now? Or was it a mix of those two?
Well, it was kind of a mix. I was wondering what was happening, and as it turned out, uh, when I got back to Way City, I was in the middle of it. It was about the 15th of February. The Tet broke out on the 30th of January, the 31st. I think it was the first or the second before Bravo Company got into the fight at Way. But when I got back and when I left, there was 32 members in my platoon. And when I got back, there was only 11 left in the action. Our CO had been killed. A friend of mine, Frank McGrath, had been killed, and several others. And we had a lot of new guys. And I'd been in country for 5 months, so as far as time in country, I was senior in the platoon. So I took over a squad leader, uh, which is a job I didn't want, but it was given to me, and I had to.
So you return from R&R in Hawaii and go directly into the battle for Way.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, the time I left my wife, and it was harder to leave then than it was the first time, because I knew I was going back into the action, and all up until that point, I had seen a lot of action, but I had not been wounded. When I got back, they were telling me that they had sent out an ambush. We were operating in the southeast quadrant of the city. It was outside the citadel, along the Perfume River, close to the boat ramp, and actually it was close to the MACV compound. And that from the MACV compound, Walter Cronkite was broadcasting from the MACV compound, so it was less than a mile from where he was.
Wow. Wow.
And uh, but we were patrolling that kind of residential area uh, in that southeast quadrant, and a lot of the buildings had been destroyed by artillery, and but they were still in the enemy was still in the area. You'd have to the south of us, there was a big rice paddy, and across the rice paddy there was uh, the positions of the enemy. We would sleep in the houses that were abandoned, and the first night, I guess the second night, we were going out on an ambush, set an ambush. It happened to be the same route that the squad the night or two before had taken, and I had learned in the time that I'd been there, we never take the same route on an ambush because
Mm-hmm.
you may be observed and they would just be laying for you. So we took a roundabout way to get to the position that we were going to set up the ambush, and but we had to walk through water, and people were complaining about getting their feet wet. And
Mm.
uh, you know, you have to get your feet wet. It's
Mhm.
you can't avoid it. But as it turned out, we were coming up this trail that intersected with a main trail where, from what I understand, an ambush took place the night before or 2 nights before, and where we took several casualties. As we approached that intersection of those two trails, we were coming up by, there was, I was second man back and the point man, and we both saw him at the same time. There was a NVA soldier who was sleeping.
Hmm.
He was laid up against well, he didn't know he was sleeping or if he was dead. And he had his AK-47 laying across his lap, and he stirred, and both of us um, shot him. I mean, shot at him. Who he was? We killed him, and I don't know who shot killed him, and it wasn't something that um, you know I would brag about like some people like to do, but at the same time when that happened, up ahead on the trail, there was several NVA who had set up an ambush to, we assume, to ambush us when we came, if anybody came along that trail. And so they fired shots at us when after we had taken out, I guess it was one of their uh, fellow soldiers, and so we returned fire. Those that had an angle on it, I stepped out and we just started firing in that direction. We didn't. The next day we found blood trails, so we hit one of them, but we didn't follow it into the rice paddy. The area that we were mainly patrolling was made up of houses that were uh, concrete, and some of them were grass sutures. So it was a mixture, I guess. But they had I wouldn't know if you call them streets, we call them trails. I mean, they were laid out in grids, so it wasn't. I don't remember seeing any street names or anything, but
Right, yeah. What memories do you have of civilians in that area? Often when you see photos from way, some of the photos you see are, you get the feeling of civilians just sort of stumbling around in a daze almost.
well, when I
Reflections?
came into Way City from back to my unit, coming in from Fubai, which was our base camp. Um, I saw, uh, quickly dug graves where shallow graves where bodies were buried. It seemed like all of there was very few civilians walking around, but you saw abandoned vehicles, little scooters, and bicycle, say, just laying by the side of the road, and every building had pock marks from the enemy gunfire or from our own gunfire. A lot of the buildings were kind of had a stucco plaster on them,
Mm.
um, but as far as most of the civilians had left the city, um, but the area that we were in, there were some that stayed in their homes. In fact, we took over uh, uh, one of the houses that we stayed in one night. The family was still there, and they were very hospitable. I mean, they were, we interacted with them, and but for the most part, we didn't see that many civilians.
Now, down further south in the combat you'd seen before you went on R&R and before the battle for Way, was some of that fighting with Viet Cong?
Yeah, I think There was one battle which actually was an overrun. Um, we were positioned in a this is around Hoi An, and it's around the 1st of September, last of August. There was we were getting reports. We had a platoon patrol base, which was operated near a little village, and there was a popular force. Popular force is the local militia
Sure.
uh, that was there, and their compound was about 100 yards away, and we were out in the open. We had rice paddy in front of us, and we had a graveyard, a cemetery on our left, and we were about 100 yards out from the tree line or from where the main village was, and so we were in the open more so than there was no cover surrounding trees or anything in our particular position. But we would run ambushes out of that every night. And this particular time, we were, I don't know how many, we would usually send out 2 a night. For, one squad would go out half the night, another squad would, of the 3 squads, assuming we had 3, enough to make up three squads. We
Yeah.
were undermanned a lot. So, but anyway, we would alternate, and then of course we'd stand watch on the perimeter of our base, and it was our perimeter was just a berm we had was surrounded by concertina wire, and we had a what we call tanglefoot, which was crisscross barbed wire stretched, tight, so it made it about 1 foot square, so it was difficult for anybody to walk through it. I mean, and plus with the concertina wire, but so we, felt like we had a pretty secure position. But this particular time, we were getting these alerts that we were that heavy activity was in the area, Viet Cong activity, and we were getting these alerts that they had, I think, a orange alert, red alert. Red alert was attack was imminent. But anyway, the night before we went out, before this overrun took place, our squad I was in was supposed to go out, and we didn't want to.
Hmm.
We were hoping that they would change our orders because we would have to go across a rice paddy in the open. Of course, we were exposed a lot of times because there were flares uh, uh, popping all the time. These canister flares to light up the area so you could see, and if there was any movement in the area. But we, the squad leader decided we would sandbag the ambush. In other words, we weren't going to where we were supposed to go because he thought it was too dangerous.
Yeah.
We didn't tell the lieutenant, but so we went out right outside our wire, and there was a little cornfield, or it looked like corn. That was that, and we went behind that. And we set up our ambush right there, and and waited out the time that we were for our ambush to be over when we come back in. But we were in the middle of a triangle. I told you the PF compound, Popper Force was 100 yards away, and then we had our position, and then up the way of another couple of 100 yards, it was a Arvin compound. So it was we were in the middle of that triangle there.
Wow.
And during the night, they apparently the PF saw some movement. It was either our movement or something else, but they started throwing mortars out at us. So we were in the middle of a mortar attack, and so we called in, said we were coming in, made a dash for our wire to this. But I mean, the mortars were close because they were raining debris down on us, but nobody was injured. It turned out the next day, the platoon sergeant was inspecting our wire, and he found a shape charge Shape charge is something like a Bangalore torpedo designed to blow a hole in the wire.
Mhm.
So we figured that it was probably intended to overrun our position at some point when the attack was on. Uh, and so it was disarmed and everything. But really, we were very close. We could have very easily intercepted that, whoever it was, that enemy soldier, Viet Cong, that planted that. If it was planted that night before, we could have been uh, uh, in the right place to intercept that. But we didn't see anything. So we had 100% watch that night. Um, 2 men to a hole, and nothing. We all night long they were popping these. Had these shooting these canister flares, and it almost seemed like daylight. It was just so many flares in the sky. And about 2 o'clock, I guess it was later than that, probably 3 or 4 maybe. They attacked the PF compound. We heard this big explosion, and I was in the hole with another guy. Um, and we turned around to see it was to our back. We were out facing the cemetery, and the PF compound was behind us. And we turned around to see what was going on. And they attacked, they'd thrown a satchel charge or something into the corner position. But the next thing we knew, there was a automatic rifle fire that ripped up the side of our bunker. And so we had enemy out in front of us. And so I was out in the cemetery, and they were hiding behind these mounds, because they would the Buddhists would bury their dead in a sitting position, from what I understand. So you had these mounds, but then you had crosses out there too, because there was Catholic.
Yeah, thanks.
Half the school was Catholic. But anyway, we don't know if we hit anybody, but they were keeping us pinned down, but they never did attack our position, and we assumed that it was that we had destroyed their avenue of approach with that taking out that shape charge. The PFs took 100% casualties. They killed everybody in there. And the next day, when we went over to clean up, we did take a casualty, and of course the lieutenant got reprimanded for not going over to help. But if we had gone to help, they had set up an ambush. We saw where they were laying for us. They were waiting for us to come out and assist, and we would have been ambushed too. So,
Wow.
but we were unscathed. But
So the popular forces that the Viet Cong attacked, they were completely wiped out.
yeah, and their families lived there in the village, and there was a lot of people crying and everything. And they were, like I say, we went over to help clean up and load the bodies on the trucks.
So did the Viet Cong spare the women and children?
The women and children were in the village. They just attacked the compound.
They attacked the compound.
And up the way, the Arvins were overrun too. They took 75% casualties, but they had U.S. Army advisors with them. But these are just the report. I can't state these as facts. These are just the things that we heard, and you couldn't always believe the things that you heard.
Right.
But I saw with my own eyes that the devastation and the bodies. So it was bad, which no matter how you looked at it. Most of the action that we had, we took from booby traps and snipers, and there was several instances where we were out on patrol. We had people trip booby traps. In fact, we were ambushed one day, and this is my first action in the field. I was carrying a radio that day. The new guys get to carry the radio because it's just more weight to carry. And uh, we were walking in a rice paddy out from a tree line, and the uh, guy behind me was a F-Forward observer, uh, and ambush zeroed in on him, and I guess as the leader of the unit, and he got shot in the chest. He was right behind me, and of course there was could hear the bullets whizzing by. They were trying to take out the communications also, but that was one of my first actions. And then, like I say, we had several instances of where we tripped booby traps. In fact, I stepped on a booby trap one day and it didn't go off, but pressure detonated charge, and my foot stepped on. They covered it with a little straw mat or something and camouflaged it so you wouldn't see it. And my foot stepped on the side of it and slipped into the hole. And what I think happened is instead of coming directly down on the booby trap, it pushed it off the striker, so it did not go off. I mean, it was very primitive. It was as many of the booby traps were. So it's hard to say if it would have even gone off at all. But
it was, if it had gone off, it sounds like it was a matter of maybe a half an inch or something like that, depending on where your foot was
yeah,
positioned.
yeah. And then there was another instance in late October. We've been patrolling all day, and we were setting in for the night. Uh, and I dug my position with a guy named Ron Pearson, who had just been returned to the field, and he'd been wounded twice already. But he only had 2 weeks to go in country, and he was the radio man, and I was kind of his backup, and we were eating our chow together and getting ready for set in. Like I said, we'd already dug our fighting position for the night, and he was telling me that he only had 2 weeks to go, and he was kind of joking and he said, maybe I'll get a third Purple Heart and get out even sooner. You get wounded 3 times in separate actions,
Yeah.
get automatic ticket home.
Right.
Well, it turned out that shortly after that, we were ordered to march to this position in the middle of the night. Now, this was the whole company. We had all 3 platoons together. We didn't usually operate as a company unit. Trying to move at night, 3 platoons is very slow going. But we went through this village, not knowing it was an enemy village, and not even knowing that there was a village there at all at the time. We were going up this embankment, and Ron was right in front of me, and he didn't trip the booby trap, but somebody, I think the point man, tripped it. He was going up kind of an embankment, but he was in front of me, and I saw the flash of the explosion, and apparently it killed him instantly. I mean, his body probably shielded me from the blast. Lieutenant was walking next to him because to be near the radio, but he got a piece of shrapnel from him. But only Pearson was the one that was killed, and 2 point men were wounded. And anyway, I don't want to go into detail on this, but we all gathered around, put a perimeter around the village, and called in the medevac at night, and got the wounded out. But we were then went through the village, divided up the first platoon, took half the village, and another second platoon took the other half. And during the course, it was kind of like a search and destroy mission. Now it's been exaggerated by in books. Several books have cited this. It's been exaggerated a lot, but still, there were some innocent. Well, you don't know how innocent they were, but there were some civilians that were killed. I think about a dozen. Like I said, that was probably one of the worst nights in Vietnam, and I'd rather not talk about it right now.
It sounds like what you're getting at, without getting into the details, without discussing the details of what happened, but it sounds to me like what you're getting at is the what happens to young men who are thousands of miles from home, who are in the incredibly intense, not only in the incredibly intense world of war, but the even more intense world of guerrilla warfare. When you're dealing, as you've already said, primarily or to a significant degree with mines, with snipers, every step you take could lead to an explosion. Every Vietnamese person you look at, doesn't matter if that cute kid is smiling or not, you know,
Yeah, a lot of times you didn't know who the enemy.
you don't know who's friend or foe. And you're talking about, young people, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, who, in addition to all of this, are dealing with all the other stresses in Vietnam. Put the NVA and the VC aside, the heat, the humidity, the mosquitoes, the leeches, the snakes, the rats. And so young people who are under incredible stress every minute of every day, and then something like what you described happens to Pearson, and it just sounds to me like young men snap.
Well, I could say that I don't know if how much that I changed, but I would see the change in the personality of so many guys that after 2 or 3 months there, they became completely different people. Maybe maybe they were like that all the time, but uh, it's kind of a defense mechanism, I guess. You you have I think what they say, the devil may care attitude. It's uh, they're just they take that attitude to try to survive, and so they have in their mind hate for the people, hate for anybody that's Vietnamese. I didn't have that way. I never did get like that. I don't, I felt sorry for the people, and hated doing some of the things that we had to do. That really distresses me. But like I say, they make an indelible impression on your mind for the rest of your life. And the things that I remember seem like they're more recent past than the things that have happened since then.
You said at the outset that your wife, when she's thinking about you going to Vietnam, she saw it as a death sentence. And you said that at that time you didn't see it that way. But I'm
Well,
wondering, I mean, after a while, did you start, you're in this case where your foot misses a mine, or, it's a matter of a half an inch whether that mine probably goes off or not. You've described what happens to Pearson. You've got the sniping, you've got the ambushes, you've got Way, you've got so much more to come after Way. We're going to talk about it. You yourself are significantly wounded. I mean, after a few months, did you just sort of say, oh yeah, this is a death sentence, it's just a matter of time?
no, I didn't. I kept in my mind that I was going to make it through that, and it seemed like there's several different instances. I won't go into detail, but where where guys seemed to have a premonition that they were going to get killed, and then something would happen to them. Uh, and it, I mean, like I say, it was really, really strange that there's four different instances in particular. But they would start thinking about it, start talking about it. And of course, everybody in the squad, we, tell them, to shut up, don't talk about it. You don't talk about those kind of things. But still, it occurred, and the same thing happened to me. I had this feeling of an impending doom after I was wounded the first time. Because my friend Eddie Kelly, who was I met first when I first got over there. We had been through a lot. He was a machine gunner, and but when I first met him, he was reading his Bible, and I found out he was from Tennessee, and he was a Christian, like I was, and it was just a difficult situation for a, a, a Christian to remain. You have to have hope. You have to have prayer, have to pray, to just get through it all. I mean, that's the way it was with me. But he got just before I was wounded the first time. We were. It was right after we took over for 26 Marines at Quezon. This was month after Way City. We had Operation Pegasus, which was the operation that broke the siege of Quezon, the 7-day siege. And we were assigned to different hill positions during that time. We would rotate. We were on Hill 861, and we were in the trench line. We were, no significant action was taking place then, but we were about just before dark, but just getting dark, and we were hadn't set up our watches yet. We had we were all standing in the trench line talking and shooting the breeze, and heard a sport around flying through the air, and it landed right outside our trench line. And the explosion, heard the explosion, and ran for our bunkers. And there was another round that followed it, and the second round landed right in front of Kelly's bunker. It killed Kelly's assistant gunner and wounded Kelly. I didn't realize how badly he was wounded, but I was with him on the LZ waiting for the medevac. I was telling him it was dark by then. I was telling him he was going to go home, and even he's mortally wounded, but he still had that smile on his face. He just says, "Yeah, I'm going to see my girl." He'd always talk about his girlfriend, and he died 3 days later after from his wounds. On the same day that I was choppered up to 881 South, where I got wounded the first time, I was we were choppered up to 881 South, and that was probably one of the most bombarded hills in the entire Vietnam War. Maybe not as intense at that particular time, but when a chopper would land, you could expect incoming, and that's what they told us. We could expect incoming. I was a squad leader, so I was the first one off the back of the chopper so I was running for the trench line, and my fellow rest of my squad was following me, and a mortar round landed close by, and it got a little piece of shrapnel in the corner of my mouth and a piece of shrapnel in my arm. But so that was my first wound. And I was medevac shortly after that.
And
But
how long were you out of the field?
10 days. This was on the 18th of May. And I spent 3 days in the hospital, field hospital at Fubai. And the company clerk came to pick me up, to take me back to the rear area. And I that's when I learned that Kelly had died, and I was really, I went into a severe state of depression. You know, I was pretty much by myself during the day. I'd help the company clerk sort mail and stuff like that, but everybody else was in the field at the Caisson base, and I was in the rear. I still had stitches in my arm, and I had to, you know, I would stand watch at night on the Fubai perimeter, but during the day I was pretty much by myself, and it just gave me time to think and all these things. And like I say, it was such a, I remember I never have been as depressed as that time, because I knew, you know, I've felt it all this time that God was protecting Kelly and me. And then all of a sudden, you know, Kelly has died, and then I got wounded for the first time. And so about 10, it was, there was several guys coming back from R&R. 3 guys were, so I decided to go back with them. I could have stayed in the rear for another 2 days, but I felt like I needed to be back with my squad, even though, you know, it's more dangerous out there. So I went back with them. It took us a couple of days to get back to our unit, but on the day we got back, it was Memorial Day, May 30th. And they brought cold fried chicken and and I melted ice cream out for a holiday treat, I guess.
So you said that you know, you felt that, you know, God had been protecting you and Kelly. Now
Yeah,
Kelly's been killed and you've been wounded. So that must have changed your thinking then, or
I did.
changed how you looked at things. So how did that change your outlook on things?
Well, I just seemed to have this feeling of impending doom, you know, and I had 73 days to go on my short timers calendar. We had a little piece of paper that I mark off the days, you know. And, had a picture of a turtle, and his shell was a helmet. And it was divided into, had 100
Days, right?
days. I've still got it somewhere.
Right.
I mean, anyway, I had 73 days. And the next day when we got back to that unit on the 30th, I felt like my arm was infected, and it was draining and everything. I went to the corpsman. You know, I wanted to go back then. I wanted to go back to the rear.
Well,
But the corpsman gave me a vial of penicillin, you know, to take. So I went to my unit. But shortly after that is when we got the call to reinforce Echo Company 21223, I think it was. It was under attack, and so we marched. It was almost dark. We marched. It was about 2 miles. We before we got that night, we set in for the night, and we're a couple of 100 yards from where Echo Company was. All through the night, artillery 105s from Quezon were pounding that area. And the rounds were so close that some of the shrapnel was, you could hear it twirling through the air and landing close to our position. The next day, we started an assault on that ridge line, and but like I say, all through the night, everybody knew that there was something bad was going to happen. My platoon, first platoon, was behind the second and third platoon. They were advancing on the ridge line, and we didn't have any resistance until they reached the top of the ridge. But you couldn't see anything. You couldn't see where the enemy was because of the 3-foot elephant grass that they had growing everywhere, and so you really didn't know where the enemy was. You just and like I say, when the second, third platoon reached the top of the ridge, it's when they opened up at close range, and that's when a hand-to-hand, I'd say muzzle-to-muzzle fight began. My platoon, we were the reserve platoon. I was ordered to take my squad to the left-hand flank of the, which was the top of the ridge, and work my way down to retrieve our dead and wounded. As we were going up, the bullets were whizzing overhead. You can hear them zipping overhead, but they weren't that close. But as we approached the top of the hill, Steve Klecki, our point man, he turned around and looked at me, and he was scared. We were all scared, and he just told me that he didn't want to go any further. So I went up alongside of him. My heart was pounding. I can remember how it was just pounding in my chest. And from where he was, I moved up to just below the crest of the hill, crest of the ridge, and tried to listen for anybody calling for help. The area had been flattened by an artillery round from the night before. And about that time, Tom Northrup, he was a second squad leader. He had been assigned to take out a machine gun that had our second and third platoon pinned down along the ridge. And I wasn't aware of the machine gun. I was just tasked with getting our dead and wounded out. And he crouched down, I guess, about 15 feet from me on my right, and he called out for the third platoon, and he called out for he remembered calling out, he said, for the gun team. He was trying to locate the gun team. But about that time, the grass in front of us just exploded with gunfire, machine gun fire. I could see the bullets, tracer rounds ripping through the grass. I mean, just two feet away. It's in between Tom and I. So they didn't hit either one of us, but it sounded to me like, of course, it was muffled in the grass. It sounded to me like it was only 5 feet away. I mean, I just started blasting away what seemed to be, point blank range, just firing, not full automatics. It was semi-automatic, but where you just every time you depress the trigger, So I don't know how many rounds. I didn't fire a full 20-round clip, but magazine, but it was in between 10 and 20 rounds. But there was no more machine gun fire. But then there was a volley of 3 grenades. I remember seeing 3, but I don't remember hearing 2 go off. and Tom had his back turned. He didn't see him. I think he was looking out the other direction, and he turned around and said, "What was that?" You know, when one of them, they went off down the hill, there was a kind of a steep drop off. I kept firing into the grass, and at the same time, I saw more grenades come in, and I was getting up to follow him down, and one landed right beside me and exploded almost immediately. And three pieces hit me in the side of the face, and a concussion slammed me to the ground. Uh, I mean, I remember hitting the ground real hard, but I was dazed, but I was still conscious.
Hmm.
Uh, and I grabbed my helmet, my rifle, and I was sitting back on my heels, getting ready to get up and continue my retreat when one grenade came in and bounced off my flak jacket and landed in front, just in front of my knees. And I just remember just seeing it laying there, and I had the presence of mind to just try to jump as far away from it as I could. And I threw myself backwards, and it went off then. And I got three pieces of shrapnel, or two pieces in the back of my leg, but a big chunk of about that big um, went through my lower bowel and through my bladder and lodged in the back of my back. And I felt like I just been blown away. I was in excruciating pain, uh, and I was laying there in the grass trying to, you know, I just couldn't move. But Tom saw that I didn't make it down the hill, so he and about two or three others came up to get me. Which, if they had now, it would probably been certain death for sure. Um, but they were able to get me back into a safe place. And
How long were you there before they came and got you?
it was almost immediate. I mean, they were still throwing grenades. Two of them were wounded. I say two. I thought it was two, but Tom remembered it was only one. But the one that I remember, particularly when they were, I was kind of crawling on all fours, and they had my flak jacket, and, you know, was kind of, you know, carrying me on each side. And I remember the guy that was wounded. I don't remember his name. I saw the explosion, you know, out of the corner of my eye on the other side of his leg, and his shrapnel hit his leg. And if his leg had been there, it would have probably hit me. They were able to get me to a safe place, and but it seemed like an hour or two. I laid there in the hot sun before. I mean, a corpsman guy came in and gave me some morphine, but the morphine didn't seem to help. But they didn't think I was wounded as badly as it was, because I was just bleeding from the waist down. They didn't realize I had internal injuries, and they didn't realize it when they got me back to the Charlie Med at Quezon. That was they put us on. They brought tanks out from the base, and they loaded the wounded on tanks, and I was put on the top of on the back side of the uh, metal, uh, 1 inch armor plating or something to head on the tank. It was very, very hot. I remember it being hot, but it was, um, and there was another guy that was wounded pretty bad. But he helped to hold me on.
You said that going into this battle after Kelly was killed, you said that you had this feeling of impending doom. And
Well,
after you were wounded, did you think, well, I guess I was right? Or, you know,
I I didn't really think about that. I was just, you know, trying to, you know, stay conscious and stay alive. I don't remember ever feeling like I was going to die. I,
Hmm.
I just knew I felt a lot of pain. And when they got me to Charlie Med at the Quezon base, they put me up on a stretcher, and I remember them cutting my clothes off, and there was a guy that was trying to ask me questions of my name and certain information. And I remember my tongue being so felt like it was swollen, and I couldn't talk. But it just a quick observation. I mean, there were guys coming in. It was total chaos in there, and I can remember this guy next to me had his abdomen that was cut open, this split open, and his guts were just laying on his chest, and he was screaming. Uh, you know, it's just hard to describe the the chaos that was going on there. But they quickly assessed my injuries, or thought they did, and moved me on a stretcher, put me in line for medevac at the back of the line. And if it hadn't been for this chaplain that was going around asking, checking on the guys that were laying on the stretchers, and he came to me and he asked me how I was doing, and he could see I was in great distress. And I remember seeing him grab this corpsman by the back of his shirt and spinning him around and telling him that this man is hurt a lot worse than you think. And so they put me up on the stretcher, again, stretcher stand, and they stuck a needle in my abdomen, and they drew out blood, and they knew I had internal injuries. And so I was moved to the front of the line and on the next chopper out.
And did you go right from there to the repose?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. And then they moved me into. They kept slapping my face. They didn't want me to go out into shock. They wanted to keep me awake, and because there was two of them that were standing by me in the, I guess it was the pre-op room on the ship, and I remember them bringing in a guy that just from surgery. He had both his legs and arms blown off. He was just a torso and his head, and he was just laying there next to me, and I just remember seeing him, watch him die. I could hear the corpsman back behind me saying he's taking his last breaths. Still I didn't think about dying, but when I read the operating summary, they said that I had to be resuscitated. So I don't know if my heart stopped or went, but I don't remember that. I just remember going into surgery, wheeling me in. I saw the bright light, which was probably the surgical light, and then everything was. I don't remember anything after that until I woke up from surgery, and there was a nurse sitting. I was in ICU. There was a nurse sitting by my bedside, and I was in the ICU for a couple of days, and then they moved me to, but I was still in critical, somewhat critical condition.
You've described all of these things. There are things that you've said that you don't want to talk about, but the things you have mentioned, just recently, this other wounded guy at Quezon whose his stomach is open and his intestines are on his chest. This other guy on the repose who's lost all of his limbs and then he dies. The other memories you have, and I think this question is one that, it's probably impossible to answer in any definite way, but to the extent you can, how would you explain to someone who has no idea of what combat is like, which is the vast majority of people, what it's like to carry these memories through your life? You get on with your life, you have your job, time goes on.
Well,
you know,
you have to. I mean, the memories are there, and for the longest time, I didn't talk about it. I didn't even when I went back to active duty. It's just not something I wanted to talk about, and really, how what I'm telling you today, I couldn't have talked about it then without. I just wouldn't have been able to. I mean, it's because it seemed like I was there. I was reliving it, and even now, I've relived it so much in my mind. I mean, it's such a part of my. I mean, I don't have nightmares about it. I mean, if I have a nightmare, it's about something else, but it I lay awake thinking about the real things that happen, and sometimes that has become um, dis- distressful and uh, depression. Uh, Times I get into depression, it's just harder. But I had uh, had somebody to. I guess my faith more than anything else has kept me grounded in a uh, all through the years, and knowing that I had the responsibility of raising my family, and I had a child shortly after I came back from Vietnam, and I had to, like I say, had to get on with my life.